Thank you very much, Koyana, and good afternoon to everyone in this room. Wow, 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 what a day. What a day. Unfortunately, our team from Pala had to leave us, but the room is pretty full. So thank you very much, and I would want you to give yourself a big round of applause for being still here. Thank you very much, thank you. It must have been 6 months or so ago. We did have a discussion about the science work of SIF, and the question was put into the room: does SIF do science for science sake? Wow. So I hope today is going to give us the answer to that question. And if we don't have it yet, I hope my next few slides will give us the answer. SIF science. Having been very much intrigued by the coco de mer, I'm going to speak first about the coco de mer. We listened to how long the coco de mer does live. The single tree, in fact, does live. So the long life history of the coco de mer. And this actually means that whatever we do today is going to have an impact in 50 years, in 100 years, and in 150 years to come. Now, when I started and looked at the sustainable management of the coco de mer, I was actually pushed because at the time in the 90s, poaching of the coco de mer, because of the coco de mer being the souvenir everyone would want to take home from Seychelles, a policy was put out by the Department of Environment at the time saying none of the coco de mer nuts should remain in the forest, all have to be collected because we cannot control the poaching otherwise, so to have no poaching, let's take out all the nuts. Late in the 90s, coco de mer kernel became the product to be traded in, the natural product of Seychelles to be traded in, because the nut trade was very much controlled, but not the trade of the kernel. Now, that led to even a bigger rise in poaching, and it was very clear that the poaching was more linked even to the kernel than to the coco de mer nut. So, as a result, the Seychelles Island Foundation teamed up with the Department of Environment, gave the scientific information required so that the coco de mer kernel could be listed on CITES Appendix 3 in October 2010 with no objections by none of the parties attending the Conference of the Parties meeting. And what does it mean? So being listed on the Appendix 3 means that any coco de mer kernel being exported from Seychelles to any other country in the world needs to have an export permit, needs to be documented in terms of the amount that is being traded, the trader. So it allows us for a very detailed documentation of the trade. And not only in Seychelles, but also it's being picked up in the country it's being traded to. As you know, Southeast Asia is where the kernel goes to, so we can pick up the phone and can ask anytime, what are the records, how much coco de mer kernel have you received, because it needs to be declared. With this change, also IUCN, the flag was raised for IUCN, and we contributed again to the assessment of the red list status of the coco de mer, and because of the threat by poaching, this species was listed up from vulnerable to endangered. In 2015, and again in 2019, the Department of Environment developed a national coco de mer policy, and because of the information, the scientific data we had at hand, we were asked to contribute, and we could immediately contribute to all the information required to draft this policy. This policy is now in revision, and we've already contributed again to the current revision of this policy. And in 2019, the restriction on the processing, trade, and export of the unprocessed kernel of mature nut regulation was also being put into place by the Department of Environment. And again, it was SIF who was able to contribute with the data required to justify such a regulation. In principle, this regulation is saying coco de mer kernel should not only be traded because it's coco de mer kernel, but there should be an added value to the coco de mer kernel. Because as everybody would understand, selling a piece of timber is not going to give us the same revenue than selling a piece of furniture made with the same amount of timber. So adding value is the request of that regulation. So our science, our collaborations with scientists, for instance, like with Professor Edwards, in 2010 led to a letter of recommendation that was signed by a group of scientists led by Professor Edwards that requested the Department of Environment to ensure that 20%, that the 20% sustainable harvesting limit is being implemented for the coco de mer. And SIF responded to it as managing one of the largest population, coco de mer populations in 2012 by setting up stewardship or regeneration scheme in the Vallee de Mai as well as Fond Pepper. And who has been very attentive to the coco de mer population presentation will notice that the number of nuts we were able to register or have been able to register since 2012 until 2021 under this scheme are as many as there are male coco de mer trees in the Vallee de Mai. This scheme is in revision. We've looked at the data we've been collecting there twice already. And we are extremely surprised with a high germination rate, but we are having to continue to monitor so that we can give you better data now on how many coco de mer do make it to an adult stage. So a long time project, obviously. 2017, a research group led by Christopher Kaiser use the results that were presented as well by Emma earlier this morning in terms of the coco de mer cluster and coco de mer being mothered by the female tree, saying that coco de mer nuts in the forest should not be taken from one part of the forest to another one to establish a new plantation or a new nursery, but as much as possible left to the mother tree. So we also are doing exactly that now. So whenever coco de mer nuts are registered into the scheme, they are left exactly there where they were found. In 2010, I think wherever you've been, whatever presentation you've listened to, and COVID, the magic word COVID came up, it always had a negative connotation. This time it's positive. So with having very little to non-tourists coming to our shores, there was little request for souvenirs. So we recognized that as a very unique opportunity and decided that this was the best time to entice our people to plant their very own coco de mer tree at home. So we partnered with the Department of Environment to make sure that all regulation and laws were followed, and engaged in a campaign, Planting Your Own Coco de Mer, where a total of 584 nuts were planted, the majority on Mahe, but also on Prahle. So 67 trees have been planted on Prahle, 10 on Silhouette, 5 on Surf, and 5 on Denise. The giant bronze gecko, endemic to the Vallee de Mai. For some reason, the giant bronze gecko was also listed to be being found on Silhouette, which was not correct. So in 2016, SIF helped a research group to redefine the species distribution. So the giant bronze gecko is only found on Prahle. And during that time, poaching of the giant bronze gecko became more and more apparent. We actually intercepted at the airport on Prahle people trying to smuggle the giant bronze gecko, not only once. We also had reports from, again, Germany, a trade fair where actually a pair of giant bronze gecko were being sold for 4,000 euros. So this was very alarming. And with the information and the scientific data we had at hand, we assisted the Department of Environment to compile a non-detriment findings report for CITES, hoping that this would help us to list the giant bronze gecko on the CITES appendix, but CITES did not approve the listing. So simply because there was not sufficient scientific data available at the time. So they said, go back to do your homework. And what I can tell you is that in that period of time, 4% of the giant bronze gecko population was actually being poached from the wild. But despite CITES not taking on the call, the government of Seychelles in 2020 and specifically 2021 signed the Wild Animals Bronze Gecko Aluneric Species Protection Regulations, which does prohibit the killing or purchasing of all 3 bronze geckos found in Seychelles. And although you heard something else earlier on, it also lists the 2 chameleon species. So all of these 5 species are protected under the law of Seychelles. And in 2021, also we contributed to the red list assessment, which listed, because of its very limited distribution, the giant bronze gecko as critically endangered. The black parrot, I'm just repeating, you heard it all already. After 5 years of research that involved genetic studies, the species could be declared as a distinct species by BirdLife International, which also led to an uplisting by IUCN, and by doing so, providing for hopefully more resources in the work that is required. And something what was not mentioned yet, for the protection of that bird, SIF secured funds from the EU, which helped us over a period of 8 years to eradicate the ringneck parakeet from Mahe. And why was that so important? Because we were fearing that the parakeet, apart from being able to occupy the habitat of the black parrot, also would transfer viral disease to the black parrot. And with more science, we actually confirmed that the ringneck parakeet was actually the host of a viral disease which could have led to the extinction of the black parrot. It was mentioned already, SIF is part of a group that is looking at the black parrot translocation, at the potential black parrot translocation to Silhouette. Again, invasive alien species, Fumimalziv, as we know it in Seychelles, we've looked at the slides, we looked at the distribution. It was only because of scientific monitoring that we were able to follow the impact of the ants. And in 2017, the Board of Trustees declared the Vallee de Mai a state of emergency for the Vallee de Mai, which helped us to secure the funding from UNESCO to be able to kickstart the control and eradication of the yellow crazy ant from the Vallee de Mai. So what's next? We've been looking at a lot of at species, and I think today is also a testimony to whenever you start science, more science is to come. So yes, you've been at a real science symposium because there are more questions than answers. So more is required. But specifically what we would like to focus on now in the time to come is at the impact of the tourists, the impact of our visitors to the Vallee de Mai. The Vallee de Mai is the most visited natural site in Seychelles, and with over 111,000 visitors in 2018, which is the year we are benchmarking ourselves currently. We had times and days where over 550 tourists are visiting the Vallee de Mai, which means that we really have to look at where are these people going? Can everybody be on the same trail, or should at times trails being closed? So that is what is going to be ahead of us. So going back to the question, science for science sake, the SIF research and science in the Vallee de Mai has been a game changer, not only for the Vallee de Mai, but on a national level. And that's exactly where I want to leave it. I would like to thank everybody for being here today and listening to a fantastic team. Thank you very much.